Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following.
The United Conservative Party has a new leader. Danielle Smith won in Calgary last night, taking home 53% of the vote from party members. With Smith's victory, what will become of Jason Kenney? Our legislative reporter Tyler Dawson gives us his thoughts. And a technology company in Medicine Hat has hit the big time, teaming up with Elon Musk. We will explain.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The United Conservative Party has a new leader. She is 51-year-old Danielle Smith. The former leader of the Wild Rose Party of Alberta beat out former Finance Minister Travis Toews on the 6th ballot. Smith had around 53% of the vote compared to Toews' 46%. Smith says a priority for her and the UCP moving forward is to stand up to Ottawa, protecting Alberta's interests.
No longer will Alberta ask permission from Ottawa to be prosperous and free. We will not have our voices silenced and censored. We will not be told what we must put in our bodies in order to work or to travel. We will not have our resources landlocked or our energy phased out of existence by virtue signaling prime ministers. Albertans, not Ottawa, will chart our own destiny on our own terms, and we will work with our fellow Canadians to build the most free and prosperous country on earth.
BCN's Naveen Day was in Calgary covering the UCP leadership, and he says unity appeared to be the key sentiment among many of the candidates.
Close to 85,000 ballots were submitted at Calgary's BMO Centre during the election process for the United Conservative Party to pick their new leader, Danielle Smith. She came out with a majority of valid votes in the 6th round, beating Travis Toews by 5,943 votes. During her speech, Smith touched on the rising cost of living, particularly the upcoming increase to the federal carbon tax. She placed the blame on what she calls the Notley-Singh-Trudeau coalition.
There is no excuse for any party leader seeking to be Premier of Alberta to sacrifice the welfare of Albertans for the sake of towing the line of her federal party. It is time for Ms. Notley to put the welfare of Albertans above the anti-Alberta policies of her federal NDP leader.
As for the other rivals, Leela Ahir dropped off in the first round with 1.6% of the vote. Rajan Sawhney was eliminated with 2.7% in round 2. Round 3 saw Todd Loewen dropping off with 7.8% of votes, while 8.4% went to Rebecca Schultz, who was eliminated in round 4, leaving Brian Jean disqualified in round 5 with 14.8% of the vote. The message shared among many of the candidates was one of hope and unity.
Everybody who ran in the leadership campaign had the opportunity to talk about their policies, their ideas, and what's important to them. And ultimately, Danielle Smith won. She had the ear of the majority of the membership. So I think that will be different. That unity piece should come together very quickly.
I have always said I'm a team player. I really want to make sure that we see a Conservative government re-elected here next May to continue on this path of economic growth. I do know that's what Albertans have told me across the province.
I'm excited about the future, about going against the NDP in 2023, about making sure that Albertans listen and hear our great ideas on affordability, on fixing healthcare, on our criminal justice system, and how do we make our streets safer.
Lethbridge East MLA Nathan Neudorf was also in attendance. He says he is prepared to have talks with the next premier about the unique needs of the Windy City.
We've got a Francophone school division that needs some renovations. Our separate Catholic Holy Spirit School division needs a new building. There's all those kind of things. There's some key priorities, but we've got to get some of that work so we can get our agricultural food to market.
And when it comes to healthcare, it is often a hot-button topic in politics. Premier designate Danielle Smith says Alberta's healthcare system is in a state of dysfunction and disrepair and needs to be fixed.
And it means that as Premier, when I direct AHS management to double ICU capacity by a specific date and give them the resources to do so, that direction is followed immediately. And if they can't do that, then we will find others who can do it for them.
Smith will be officially sworn in as Alberta's 19th premier following the Thanksgiving long weekend. For Bridge City News, I'm Naveen Day.
Our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent for the National Post, Tyler Dawson, joins us now from Edmonton to discuss the Danielle Smith victory. Tyler, Smith won on the 6th ballot, and it was a lot closer than many people anticipated between Smith and Taves. Does this still show some division within the party, or will they be united as we lead up to next spring's provincial election?
I think probably it's a bit of both, actually. I think there's no doubt that there's still some division within this party. The fact that it came down to a 6th ballot, Danielle Smith, I think, had 53.8% of the vote. Travis Taves around 47, I think, is the number that's sticking in my mind. So, this is, 35,000 people on one side, sort of 30,000 people on the other side. This is not a wipeout landslide victory for Danielle Smith by any means. Now, the thing is that this is the party membership, right? This is 85,000 of the 125,000 or so UCP members who voted. So there's obviously some division there. I think the question of sort of unity and if everyone's going to come together, I think is the place to look for that is caucus. Obviously, it was a pretty fractious caucus under Jason Kenney with a few people who caused problems for the soon-to-be former premier over the last couple of years. So the question, I think, is will those people look at this and go, gosh, we need to line up behind Danielle Smith, or we're going to lose to Rachel Notley's New Democrats, or, I'm going to lose my seat, I'm going to lose my job, et cetera, et cetera.
Now, there was a certain amount of mudslinging during the campaign. Will fences be mended, and could we potentially see maybe Travis Taves, Rebecca Schultz, or even Brian Jean joining Smith's cabinet?
Certainly there's an argument, I think, to bringing these people into the fold so that they sort of, maybe are less likely to cause you problems elsewhere in caucus. There's also the question of whether or not they will all stick around. Travis Taves, during the last official debate, sort of refused to commit to sticking around if he lost. So he actually might leave. We just don't know yet. And I think it's possible that they will be in cabinet. And I also think it's possible that Smith will keep some of the current people in cabinet. A really good example of a potential there is Sonia Savage, who spent the last several months, years working quite hard to build relationships, especially in the United States, over energy sort of issues. So to some extent, it would not make sense to totally clean house because you'd really be starting from scratch on some pretty important files.
Now, Smith doesn't have a seat and needs to secure one in a by-election. Where could she possibly run?
Well, there's an open seat in Calgary Elbow, I believe, which I think is Schweitzer's former riding, if I'm not mistaken. And Michaela Fry in Brooks Medicine Hat, I think, has just announced that she is not going to be running again and that there could be a by-election for that seat. So a couple options for Smith. And we don't know exactly the timeline that she might run in a by-election, but she has said that she wants to be the one to introduce the Alberta Sovereignty Act, for example, in the legislature, which she obviously can't do if she doesn't have a seat. So I would expect that we'll see a by-election in the next couple months.
The official swearing-in ceremony goes Tuesday in Edmonton. So what will become of Jason Kenney? Will he remain on as an MLA, or will he leave for the private sector?
I suspect he will stay around for a bit of the transition, but I don't think he said super clearly what he intends to do next. I do know from talking to some Smith supporters that they're actually quite scared he's going to stick around and cause problems for her in the sort of months ahead. But I suspect he'll be heading for the exits. He talked about how when he lost the leadership review, or I guess he won the leadership review, but narrowly enough that he had to leave. He said he first sort of felt shock because he thought he was going to win more handily, but then also sort of felt a sense of relief. So I think that's a pretty clear indication of where his head's at, and that maybe he's finished after 25 years or so in politics.
Thanks so much, Tyler. That was Tyler Dawson, our legislative reporter and the Alberta correspondent from the National Post, joining us from Edmonton. Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley offered up a congratulatory message to the new UCP leader Danielle Smith. She also says there will be turbulent times ahead for Albertans leading up to the next provincial election.
These next 7 months will bring more chaos, more costs, and more conflict. Smith has made it plain that the real issues Alberta families are struggling with are of no interest to her. Instead, she's preoccupied with a so-called Sovereignty Act. At best, it's a fake, another strongly worded letter to Ottawa. At worst, It will destroy jobs, destroy investor confidence, and stifle Alberta's economy at a critical moment. On healthcare, Smith has lots of plans to fire people, but no idea about how to hire the frontline professionals we so desperately need.
The Alberta government announced today that in the second quarter, the province almost 35,000 people moved to Alberta, including around 10,000 from other provinces and territories. It appears as though the Alberta is Calling campaign is working. Officials say while Alberta's unemployment rate rose slightly to 5.5%, both employment and participation rates increased and remain the highest in the country at 65.2% and 69% respectively. Well, there was a lot of sunshine and warm temperatures across much of southwestern Alberta again today. Jeanette Rocher is in now with an early look at the forecast. Jeanette, those above seasonal values should continue this weekend and into Thanksgiving Monday?
Yeah, they should, Hal. We should continue to see clear skies overnight with a bit of haze as well, with the temperature dropping down to 2 degrees this evening, which is actually seasonal for this time of year. As we get into Saturday, sunny, hazy, high of 22 degrees, which is much higher than average high for this time of year. Just wait, though, till you see what we have in store for you for Turkey Day. It's going to get nice and warm. I'll have those details coming up for you later on in the show.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is accusing federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre of courting anti-women far-right extremist groups to further his political ambitions. Poilievre said he didn't know anything about a hidden hashtag that would direct many of his YouTube videos to anti-women groups and says he condemns it.
The Conservative leader has been purposefully using his videos to appeal to far-right misogynistic online movements. These are anti-women movements, and they have had devastating real-life consequences. Mr. Speaker, I call on the Conservative leader to stand in this House, take responsibility, and apologize.
I condemned this organization, and I corrected the problem as soon as it became known to me, Mr. Speaker. But I condemn all forms of misogyny, including when the Prime Minister fired the very first female Indigenous Attorney General. Minority young women in his own caucus who had to leave politics, and I condemn him for when he dressed up in racist costumes so many times he forgot them all. We condemn it always, Mr. Speaker.
Canada's Sport Minister says the leadership at Hockey Canada has no one left in its corner. Pascal St-Onge says it's up to the provincial and territorial members to decide whether it is time to start over with a brand new organization. St-Onge responded to reports of many sponsors pulling out of Hockey Canada.
I think that it shows that Hockey Canada's leaders are losing support, that they no longer have support of their sponsors, of Canadian families that are sending their kids to play hockey, and they're also losing support from their own members. So I hope that they understand the message and leave before they burn it to the ground. Well, it's up to the members to decide what they want to do with Hockey Canada, and we're going to support whatever they decide. I think that it needs new leaders, new directors, and new experts. To renew this organization, it needs to be rebuilt.
Sadly, the harsh reality of child abuse is still quite prevalent in today's society. October marks Child Abuse Prevention Month. The Chinook Child and Youth Advocacy Centre in Lethbridge is raising awareness here in our community. They're doing so by encouraging community members to wear blue on October the 24th for National Child Abuse Prevention Day in solidarity of children who've been abused. The manager of the centre, Cheryl Patterson, says the nonprofit group has taken 160 case files since November of 2021. She says they have a new building that's currently being worked on that is set to become a permanent housing facility.
We are hoping that there's individuals or businesses in the community who are interested in investing in the future of children, who would be interested in reaching out to us to help us reach that final $150,000 that we need to solidify the renovations needed for our centre. We're working with our contractor at Silver Ridge Construction to hopefully put it out for tender beginning of January and have the centre ready to open by spring of 2023.
The centre has child and family advocates who work at the centre along with a clinical psychologist. They also work with child protective service partners, law enforcement officers, and mental health workers in a partnership to help out children who've been abused. Hardworking Albertans were honoured by the province this week. The Heritage Awards showcased individuals in various communities who have worked to preserve Alberta's heritage. Lethbridge City Councillor and President of the Historical Society, Belinda Crowson, received an award for outstanding achievement here in our city. Crowson says the honour was for exemplary leadership in the heritage field, along with the preservation and promotion of Alberta heritage.
And what specifically they pinpointed in my career was my work with the Lethbridge Historical Society, the publications I've worked on, the various books, and then back in my past, the education programs I ran at the Galt Museum and Archive. So that was what they highlighted in the award. And as you can imagine, it's an amazing honor to be recognized by my, amongst my colleagues across the province in history and heritage, because it's one of the things I love to do. And I hope seeing me win the award will inspire a lot of young historians to get out there and do more history, because there's a lot more to discover, and we need different perspectives on the stories that we know.
A total of 81 awards have been dished out to recipients from across the province since the program was reintroduced back in 2005. A Medicine Hat company has hit it big and has reached a huge deal with a big company from the United States. EnerStar Solutions made a deal with Elon Musk's SpaceX Starlink communications network and is expected to send 1,000 data terminals. They will then be deployed to customers in Texas who are operating oil rigs. Jim Vandersloot, the president of EnerStar Solutions in Medicine Hat, says this deal will help streamline the process of operating and directing oil rigs.
But what we supported with Starlink was the idea that we can give you all the long and lats of every rig in North America. So we provided them with all the long and lats to say, listen, where are the places that we can start working together? I think that's what really got them interested, because they looked at West Texas, they looked at their cell base for where they're providing data to, and they recognized that West Texas was a great opportunity for us to start in. And it's like the black hole of communications in the oil and gas industry. We have operations out of Pecos and Odessa there, so it was a great place to start. We actually just got our first 500 Starlink units landed on Odessa this morning, so they just unloaded them this morning.
Vandersloot says the company plans to offer service packages to Canadian operators by early next year. Well, we enjoyed another beautiful day here in much of southwestern Alberta, and those beautiful days will continue into the Thanksgiving long weekend. A full look at the weather picture is coming up. The Thanksgiving weekend is almost upon us, and so is more beautiful weather here in Lethbridge. Jeanette Rocher is back with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we're having a nice juicy bird again this year with all of the trimmings for Thanksgiving. Does your family also celebrate the holiday with turkey?
Yeah, we absolutely do. And the past 2 years, it's been me doing all the cooking. So I decided to take a break from the kitchen this year, and I'm going to go over to my niece's place. She's a great hostess, so I'm looking forward to that feast. And you know what? It always tastes better when it's not you doing the cooking, doesn't it? I don't know what it is about that, but we have a lovely weekend ahead of us here. Saturday, Sunday, Monday, the whole long weekend. Lots of sunshine, clear skies. 22 the high for Saturday, 21 on Sunday. And look at that, Turkey Day, all the way up to 24 degrees. Not so much for Monday evening, though. There's going to be a low pressure system moving in. We're going to be seeing some showers, and that's going to continue into Tuesday. Mostly rainy skies on Tuesday there, a high of only 7 degrees. And then look at that, we're going to climb back up to 16 degrees on Wednesday and all the way up to 26 for Thursday. So we have a little strange little bit of a weather pattern there on Tuesday. 17, the average high for this time of year, average low 2 degrees. 30 was our high temperature on this day back in 1980, and it was a chilly -11 in 1970. 7:40, that's when the sun rose this morning, and our sun set this evening at 6:58 p.m., giving us 11 hours and 18 minutes of daylight, 3 minutes shorter than we had yesterday. As we look to the west coast, nice clear skies in Victoria, 22 the high, 21 the high in Vancouver. However, inland it's going to be 25 degrees there instead of that 21 by the water. 23 degrees the high in Edmonton, and a lovely 21 in Calgary expected tomorrow. Nice clear skies across all of Alberta tomorrow. As for the rest of the prairies, mainly sunny skies as well. Saskatoon sitting at 22 tomorrow. Regina 21 with a 20k wind, and 14 degrees the high in Winnipeg tomorrow, with mainly sunny skies becoming a mix of sun and cloud in the afternoon. As we look to the central part of the country, we're seeing a little bit of rain in Toronto, 40% chance. chance, 13 degrees the high there, 11 the high in Ottawa, and 12 degrees in Montreal with nice clear skies. As we look to Atlantic Canada, we're seeing a lot of precipitation happening in that area, 30% chance of showers in Fredericton, high of 14 degrees. 17 the high in Halifax with a 70% chance of showers there, as well as in Charlottetown tomorrow, 17 the high there, and then a 60% chance rather of showers in St. John's, Newfoundland, changing to 40% chance of drizzle by the afternoon, 13 the high there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
The Canadian economy posted a modest gain of 21,000 jobs in September. That's a small recovery following the loss of more than 113,000 jobs over the past few months. Stats Canada says the unemployment rate fell from 5.4 to 5.2% in August as fewer people looked for work. It says gains in healthcare, social assistance, and education were offset by losses in manufacturing, information, culture, and recreation. Economists are saying the latest numbers show the labor market remains tight. The Bank of Canada suggested that it is partly to blame for high inflation, which it has been trying to bring down by raising interest rates this year. Stocks tumbled on Wall Street after the U.S. government reported that employers added 263,000 jobs last month. It is a sign that investors foresee more aggressive rate hikes ahead by the Fed to try and fight high inflation. Hiring south of the border fell from 315,000 in August to the weakest monthly gain since April of last year. The unemployment rate in September, however, dropped from 3.7 to 3.5%, matching a half-century low. Alberta is known for its coal mining and mining of precious metals, but did you know that digital currency is also being mined right here in Alberta? You may be familiar with the term Bitcoin. Ryan Chernesky is the director of Modern Mining in Medicine Hat and explains how Bitcoin is actually being mined.
What makes Bitcoin different is it was born in the private sector, and every 10 minutes, computers around the world take all of these transactions. They compute and they compete for solving a puzzle that's on the protocol. So there's a mathematical puzzle. Every computer in the Bitcoin network is trying to solve that problem. The winning computer that solves that problem receives Bitcoin as a reward.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Ryan Chernesky from Modern Mining coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 395 points on the day to finish at 18,583. The Dow was down 630 points to 29,296. The S&P 500 was down 104 points on the day to 3639. And the Nasdaq was down 420 to 10,652. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 480 on the day to 93.25 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 35 cents to 663 US. Gold was down 1771 to 1694.82 US an ounce. And silver was down 51 cents to $20.13 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.25 per bushel. Barley's at $9.58. Canola's at $19.66, and corn is at $12.19 per bushel. Live cattle were unchanged at $145.33. Feeder cattle were down $1 to $174.73, and lean hogs were up 58 cents to $92.95. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 72.79 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, the United Conservative Party has a new leader. She is 51-year-old Calgarian Danielle Smith. The former leader of the Wildrose Party of Alberta beat out former Finance Minister Travis Toews on the 6th ballot. Smith had around 53% of the vote compared to Toews' 46%. Danielle Smith becomes Alberta's 16th premier and will be officially sworn in next Tuesday in Edmonton. There's a Christian organization which is saving babies in Kenya who are being thrown away in dumpsters. Brian Thompson with Home of Hope has details for us shortly. And listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you. Christians have been helping people for many years in many different nations. As you see during many of our broadcasts here on Miracle Channel and a lot of the different programs, the need to help the less fortunate continues. One Red Deer-based pastor has been making a difference in the lives of African babies and their families. Brian Thompson is the International Director of Home Church based in Red Deer and is also the Director of Home of Hope. Pastor Brian, welcome to Bridge City News.
It's very good to be here. Thank you, Hal.
So what is Home of Hope all about?
15 years ago, God spoke to me that he wanted me to start helping children. And like you mentioned, I've been with Home Church in Red Deer here for over 40 years, and I was like a traveling evangelist. And I heard about the genocide in Rwanda. I don't follow news really good. I didn't know much about what happened with the genocide, but 15 years ago, I found out that Rwanda was the #1 nation in the world for needing orphan care and the #1 nation of children raising children. So I went over to Rwanda 15 years ago and just saw the most desperate children I've ever saw in my life. You can watch TV and watch a hockey game and you see the African children coming with the flies. I just used to flip the channel. But when you see children right with your own eyes, it changed my life and just caused me to do a major detour. I'm still with Home Church, and Home Church allowed me to start a Home of Hope as a charity under that covering. And we've been helping thousands of children ever since.
We'll talk about the impact in the lives of so many of those African kids in just a moment here. But let's talk about your book, Meant for More. Interesting read. Let's talk about the 4 people who basically started it all and about your transformation in regards to the book.
Yes, I love the title, Meant for More. Writing a book is a lot of hard work and we're going back and forth. But we decided on Meant for More because my life was meant for more. 15 years ago, when I saw those children, my life went to a whole new level. And I know the children that we met, they're meant for more. And it's also, the book is written for every Christian. You don't have to go to Africa. You don't have to help orphans or whatever, but God has more for you. So when I saw those first 4 children, I asked the pastor in Rwanda where I was speaking at a church, and said, I asked him a stupid question. Do you happen to know any orphan children? He just laughed at me. We went walking down this dirt pathway. I was raised on a farm, so I was down this dirt pathway. We went to this mud hut, and we saw these 4 children huddled in this mud hut. Their father had just died 2 weeks before of HIV/AIDS, and their mother was in the hospital ready to die any day. And the hopelessness on those kids' eyes just changed my life. I just had to start helping, and we just simply bought some bags of rice and some food, and we left some money with the pastor to take care of those children.
Wow. So let's talk about some of that transformation. What really changed in your heart to leave the comfort of your home to minister to so many in Africa?
Well,
those kids are a good example, right? Those 4 kids.
Yeah. I was raised as a farm boy, and I was always proud that, you don't cry and you tough it up. But I saw those 4 kids, and we were there for 2 weeks, and we saw a lot more children. It just started with those 4. And I never teared up at all until on the way home. When I got on the airplane, I sat beside this lady. She said, "What brought you to Rwanda?" And I just started crying. And I'm sitting on this plane for 9 hours from Kigali to Amsterdam, and I'm just crying and crying and crying, and I didn't know what was happening to me. And my friend beside me was wondering, the flight attendants were wondering what was happening. And as I was just praying for those 9 hours, I just felt like God said to me in Romans 5:5, it says, He puts His love in our hearts by the Holy Spirit. And I felt like God was just rewiring me. And then I get home. My wife says, "How was your trip?" I start crying. Pastor Mel, my pastor, he asked me how my trip was. I just started crying. And we just took pictures of 20 desperate kids and came home, and we started sponsoring 20 kids. And, I was a traveling evangelist, I guess, outside of our church. So I kept traveling to churches in Canada, and everywhere I went, I just asked, "Can I talk about children?" And we just started sponsoring children. I had no goals, no plans, but it just kept mushrooming and growing and growing. So, and right from the start, I want to say I've never wanted to take 1 cent from any donations. God gave me a verse in Proverbs 28:27. It says, "If you take care of the poor, I'll take care of you." And it's just kind of been a miracle journey ever since.
So, Pastor Brian, looking back to some of the earlier days, what really shocked you the most that you saw?
Well, when we started to go, when we flew, we always had to stop in Nairobi in those days because there was no direct flights into Kigali. So when we went to the layovers in Nairobi, we were shocked with the slums. There's 26 slums in Nairobi. And I had a friend that I had known many years before, just taking a mission trip. And he started telling me about these slums. And I went for a tour through the slums. And we just saw these people living in these dog sheds and
little shanties, right?
Little shanties and sleeping on the floor and the sewer running down the streets and 700,000 people living in a slum. It's just worse than living on like a pig pen. And then while we were there, we started Home of Hope Project in Kenya. And on the news one night, they were talking about how babies were thrown away live in plastic bags into the city dump. Nairobi has a 30-acre dump in the middle of the city. And people, because of, rape and incest or extreme poverty, they just throw their baby away. And that just, broke our heart. And we started hiring guards to walk through the dump looking for live babies. Just who had ever heard of such a thing? And sadly, I talk about this in the book, step by step how we did this, but guards would arrive and the babies were already dead because of animals that lived in the slums. And we prayed right in the slum saying, God, what can we do to beat the animals and rescue these babies? And I just got this picture of this great big billboard, and we put up 3 big billboards that says, please don't throw away your babies. Call this number. And we put up these 3 billboards at the entrances into the dump. And we've been averaging 15 calls every day of ladies that are in crisis, ready to throw away their babies. And thank God they're calling us before they throw away their baby. But we started something called the Dream Center with the permission of Matthew Barnett from Los Angeles, who founded the Dream Center. We got permission to use the Dream Center, and we just started rescuing these babies, hiring some caregivers, and buying some cribs. It was just, those are the most horrific stories.
Wow.
How
that's
changed
powerful.
my heart. The first 4, then the kids thrown away in the garbage, moved my heart to another level.
So those babies are found homes then? They're adopted out?
What we started, with the government process, they allowed us to rent a home, and we rescued 15 kids. And then we rented another house for 15 kids. And then at a conference here in Red Deer, we raised about $300,000, and we bought land and we built a 3-story building called the Dream Center. And it's a temporary area where kids can come back to health. A lot, we have an incubator. Most of the kids we rescued are malnourished. Some of the kids that were thrown away were just handicapped. One little boy, his name is Samuel Lucas. He can't hear and he can't talk. And it's like the parents didn't want him anymore and threw him away.
Wow.
Another girl this year was born without toes. And some people believe that if there's some defect in your body, then you're cursed, and they don't want a cursed child. So they discard them. So we have worked with the National Child Welfare of Kenya, and we are recognized as the #1 rescue center in Nairobi. And it's just thrilling. And we've met all the government regulations, and we are qualified to place children into foster families and into adoption now within Kenya. We don't adopt anywhere else in the world, just within Kenya. And some children, we are hoping that the mother will reconsider and want their children back. So we put those children into family units where there's like 6 children living together, sometimes with a pastor and his wife or a caregiver, and we're loving those kids, and we call them family units. So our goal is to rescue 50 children and place them every year, and it's really expanding and growing.
Well, that's beautiful, seeing you do God's work like that. Pastor Brian, can you give us an update on how the lives of the original 4 people has really changed?
In my book, we do a lot of before and after. So we have the picture of the first 4 children, and now 15 years, we're celebrating our 15th anniversary right now. We have those same four children. One of them's married. One of them is working with Home of Hope now, and the 2 others are still in school. And then the little boy, his name is Samuel, that was in the plastic bag. Our first child rescued. He is now 14 years old, I think, and we got pictures through the book of him like 5 years old, 10 years old, and now as of the writing of the book, an updated picture. So a lot of before and after. We have 162 color pictures, and some of them relate to my life. The subheading is called Discover the Next Chapter of Your Life. And, when I was 48 years old, God had another chapter for me and launched this whole life-changing detour of his purpose. And then a lot of the pictures are before and after of how we've rescued kids. We have about 7 different ways we rescue children, but monthly sponsorship is the one that we're focused on the most.
So, Pastor Brian, did you see a real need to help bring other people on board to help teach young women how to be mothers, especially in Nairobi?
Yes, we thank God we've literally had hundreds of people going with me on teams. In fact, there's 26 other contributors that have been on teams with me, and how they've gone over and sat in a rocking chair and hugged these orphans or these rescued children. And then we're always training. We have something in our church called Success Builders, and we're training people to make money for themselves. So even my next trip, I just booked my ticket to go back in November. I have a businessman from Penticton coming with me, and he's coming with the only purpose to help train teenagers, these rescued teenagers that are teenagers now, how they can make their own money, and just many, many hours over the 15 years of how to help women become self-sustaining. We've got food carts where the ladies are allowed to literally take a food cart out on the street, and they cook their food with a hibachi, a little barbecue, and sell it on the street. We have ladies in Congo that sell charcoal door to door, and these ladies can make $5, $10, and $15 a day and support their own family. So to me, the best way to help children who have a mother who can work, the best by far is the invention of microloans. And we've used that very strongly for 15 years. In fact, today I was just online with Congo of how we can expand our microloan projects to help more women raise their own children.
So how helpful is it to really work with some of the local churches who have those contacts, especially in the slums, to reach people with the gospel of Christ?
When we went 15 years ago, we had our home church was one church in 6 locations here in Alberta. And when I went as a when Jesus saw people, he preached to them, he healed them, and then he fed them. So we believe the longest, best solution is to plant churches. And I've been involved planting 100 churches this last 15 years. And when we plant a church, then we help all the children, especially like in rural Kenya, rural Rwanda, rural Congo. Some kids walk 15 miles one way just to come to our feeding projects. We feed 4,000 children every weekend, a hot, healthy meal. So, just another way of helping children and, building some kind of relief that's going to work. So, planting churches. And then, many people have donated money to build a building. It's hard to feed children out in the grass, or they'll just fight over the food. We get them into a building and we shut the door. We teach them about Jesus and then feed them. So we thank God for hundreds of sponsors who sponsor children and help buy land, help build churches, go teach, microloans, and it's just fun. More money comes in, we keep helping more and more people.
Amen. That's wonderful. Pastor Brian, if people want to pick up your book, Meant for More, or they want to get involved in the ministry, where should they go?
They can go to, I just typed on the screen there, homeofhope.ca. It has a link. And I'm so excited that it's now available on ebook for people that are out. We've got, I've been launching this book in Edmonton. I was just in Milk River this weekend. I'm in Stettler, then I'm going to Ponoka, then I'm coming to Penticton, Ontario. So I'm traveling to give out paper copies. And then my family and friends told me I had to read the audiobook. And I go, I don't want to read the audiobook. I'll tear up on the stories. And they say, you have to. So the audiobook on Audible through Amazon is also available. So Kindle and Kobo, ebooks, and or they can call and we can mail a book anywhere, especially in Canada. I'm not quite sure. Oh, we sent one book to the States as well. So the book just came out this month.
Pastor Brian Thompson is the director of Home of Hope. Thanks so much for joining us today from Red Deer, Alberta.
Thank you so much.
Cryptocurrency has been with us for over 10 years, and this component of the financial world is still a mystery to some of us. We definitely hear about the volatility in the crypto markets and that there are winners and losers. And then there's a whole mining process, and what do we even use these digital currencies for? Well, to unravel and reveal more about cryptocurrencies and their connection to Medicine Hat and area, Ryan Chernisky, Director of Modern Mining, joins me today. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So first off, Ryan, can you maybe give us a brief idea of what crypto or digital currencies are?
Yeah, so digital currencies started back in 2009 with Bitcoin. So it's been with us for about 13 years now. Bitcoin was the granddaddy of all cryptocurrencies. To this day, they don't really even know who the founder was, which is part of the mystery and aura to it. But it's a technology that was put together with the idea. It was born out of the Great Recession, the crisis that occurred back in 2009. And it's basically an answer to excess money printing by the government. It's a private currency. And since that day that Bitcoin was born, there are now thousands of other cryptocurrencies. They are not the same as Bitcoin. Each has its own different use and case. But Bitcoin remains sort of the central sun, if you will, with all those other cryptocurrencies revolving around it.
Sounds a little confusing, almost like you need to go to a university of cryptocurrency or something to understand it all.
Yeah, the basics are fairly simple, but you're right. Once you dive down the rabbit hole, there is a lot of information to learn, which is part of what we do these interviews for, to try to explain to people, because there's a lot of misconceptions out there on cryptocurrencies. Some are valid and some are downright wrong, but that's just because a lot of people just don't understand the technology yet.
Yeah. So what are these digital currencies being used for right now?
So they're in their infancy. So I equate the digital currency space right now to the way internet back in the late 90s, when internet first came along. We didn't really know what the use cases were going to be for it. So in the world right now, there's payment systems that occur. So there's companies like Square, which have payment systems. They use digital currencies. The blockchain is the underlying technology for digital currencies. And if you, to understand a blockchain, all it is a ledger. Debits and credits, we've had those in accounting for years and years. Well, that ledger gets digitized, and why it's called a blockchain is all of the transactions that occur are blocked, and every few minutes they're added to a chain. So computers keep track of this digital ledger, and they all connect with each other, and they make sure that that digital ledger for each computer is the same. And that way it's called immutable. There can't be changes to that digital ledger. So that's, where things are evolving. Our payment systems right now, we've got Visa, we've got MasterCard. We will continue to use those, I believe. Those are companies that are incumbents. They've been there for a long time. But in the background, they're starting to use blockchain technology to underpin their checks and balances as they do their payment systems in behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned this is private. So what do governments think about this, and banks for that matter?
That's the $1 million question. Governments don't like, particularly authoritarian type governments, don't like when there is something separate that they can't control. Even our own governments like to have control so that there's some checks and balances and oversights. And Bitcoin has had the criticism of being used by the criminal underground networks and all that. And in the past, that's occurred, but that also occurs with U.S. dollars, with Canadian dollars. In fact, up to 5% of transactions that are done in U.S. dollars are considered illicit. So it's not like a cryptocurrency has is the only place where illicit activities would occur. Governments, I think over time, will start to embrace the technology more, but there needs to be regulation for it. So industries like ours, we're happy with the regulations. I think blocking the technology in terms of Bitcoin, it's actually that horse is out of the barn. It's been around for 13 years now. I think jurisdictions in North America, especially, and Europe are starting to accept it. They would rather tax and regulate it as opposed to somewhere like China, which has outright tried to ban it. But even to this day, China tried to ban to ban Bitcoin mining. It's still 20% of the world's hash rate comes out of China. So it's virtually impossible to ban it completely.
That's interesting. So can people literally order a pizza with it? Or, I mean, I've heard cases like that. I think it just depends on who accepts it, right?
There was a famous case way back when the guy tried to buy 2 pizzas. He spent 10,000 Bitcoin each, I think, for each pizza. And I haven't done the math today because Bitcoin is quite volatile.
Today it would have been worth $60,000 or something. It was like the most expensive pizza on earth.
No, I have tens of millions.
Maybe
of
even more.
Is what it is. Yeah, it's crazy. So the poor guy should not have spent his Bitcoins on pizza.
No, he shouldn't have. So you mentioned mining earlier. So maybe tell us a little bit more about how these currencies are mined or created.
Yeah. So if you look at our currency right now, the Canadian dollar, it's created by the central banks. So there's the US central bank, the Fed Reserve, there's the Canadian central banks. That's where our money comes from now. In the Bitcoin world, it comes from an emission schedule. So there's a protocol. What makes Bitcoin different is it was born in the private sector, and every 10 minutes, computers around the world take all of these transactions. They compute and they compete for solving a puzzle that's on the protocol. So there's a mathematical puzzle. Every computer in the Bitcoin network is trying to solve that problem. The winning computer that solves that problem receives Bitcoin as a reward. So right now it's 6.25 Bitcoins are rewarded every 10 minutes. So there's 900 per day. And these computers are what secures the network. So essentially, they use energy, and that energy is used as sort of a force field to make sure that that computer network stays secure, which the Bitcoin network is now the most secure network on the planet, secured by over 2 million specialized computers that are continually trying to solve this mathematical puzzle. So unlike the central banks, which sort of print money behind the scenes out of thin air, no one really knows how much the Federal Reserve prints every day, or the Canadian banks. They'll report it, but behind the scenes, it's very difficult to tell that number. In the Bitcoin world, you can tell exactly how many Bitcoins are produced per day, how many will be produced next year. The end game is only 21 million. So it's a scarce resource. When something is scarce, it becomes more valuable over time as its utility increases.
That's incredible. Okay, so your company, Modern Mining, that's what you do, right? You create cryptocurrency, and you are located in Medicine Hat, right?
Correct. We're a Bitcoin miner based in Alberta, out of Medicine Hat. Yep.
Why did you choose Medicine Hat for a mining location?
So the Alberta electricity market, and electricity is our biggest expense in the business, is deregulated, but there are regulations in Alberta. So throughout most of Alberta, you have to pay transmission and distribution charges. Alberta allows municipalities to produce their own electricity. And what's unique about Medicine Hat is there are large gas fields in the area. So energy for Medicine Hat is produced through these through generators for these gas fields. And the transmission and distribution charges, which are one of our biggest expenses on the electricity cost side, is less expensive there. So, we worked with the municipality, businesses like ours, bring in jobs, and that's what municipalities want. So they've been wonderful to work with, and we certainly would like to continue to grow in Alberta, stay within Canada, There are some difficulties in the Canadian system with, we're trying to work with other jurisdictions that are a little bit more friendly to Bitcoin miners, but we certainly would like to develop the technology more north of the border here.
Yeah, definitely. So do you think Medicine Hat or maybe other parts of southern Alberta could become kind of like a hub for this new kind of mining?
I think they could. Yeah, I think the Alberta government has a mandate to try to expand our business within Alberta beyond oil and gas. We're trying to diversify our electrical sector so that it's not reliant on fossil fuels. I think Bitcoin mining, one of the big utilities of it is that it can help to balance out electrical grids. So as we move towards more wind and solar, the sun always doesn't shine, the wind doesn't always blow. And so what energy providers have to do is they build those solar farms and wind farms much greater scale than they need to be, because on days when it's cloudy and not windy, you don't have as much energy. So if you put a Bitcoin miner on site, then when there's too much energy produced, windy days, sunny days, Bitcoin miners can use that energy because it's in abundance. When there's no wind and no sun, there's less energy produced. We need to, turn on our machines at home. Then the Bitcoin miners can shut down. There's more energy to go out to the grid. So instead of these highs and lows that you get, it tends to flatline the grid much more and keep the prices stable. So there's one of the real world utilities where power companies are starting to recognize that a fleet of Bitcoin miners on site monetizes that excess energy and helps to reduce prices and costs for you and I at home.
Interesting. So is solar a viable power source then for your kind of mining?
It's coming along. It's the problem with solar, right, is our battery technology is getting there. It's not quite there yet. So it's great when the sun's shining, but what do you do at nighttime when all of a sudden the electricity disappears? The miners we use, they're very expensive. So they like to be online 24/7, 365. So as battery technology improves, I think solar is going to be a much more useful in Bitcoin mining. But there are companies out there right now. I believe Square is one of them. Tesla might be as well. I think they're testing out large-scale solar Bitcoin mining operations. And like I mentioned previously, I don't have a crystal ball for the future, but I do believe it's going to be a strong part of our network in the future on our electrical grid to help stabilize things.
That's so interesting. Okay, so on the topic of southern Alberta, of course, so one of the big topics of conversation in this region is orphan wells. So how is your company or maybe others helping with a solution to this?
That's a unique problem to Alberta. I mean, we're in oil and gas and we know there's thousands of orphan wells out there that need to be remediated. Well, the government, the taxpayer, they don't want to pay for it. Industry doesn't want to pay for it, but yet you've got thousands of wells out there. To my knowledge, no one is doing this right now, but we would be absolutely open to using Bitcoin mining to monetize the energy that's on site. And one of the beauties with Bitcoin miners is they're very portable. So you can take them, move them all over. They can go to remote sites. You could utilize that energy, turn that energy into dollars, use those dollars to then remediate the site. Each well site, whether it's $10,000 or $1 million, depending on what's been done there in the past, that would be a way where the taxpayer wouldn't be on the hook. The private sector can solve a problem. We can help diversify Alberta's economy, and we can get some of this environmental problem cleaned up. I think it's a huge utility use case for Bitcoin, which honestly, it hasn't even been looked at very much at all, but I think in the future it would be a great option.
So interesting. How big is this cryptocurrency sector currently?
It's big. It's growing from zero 13 years ago to over $1 trillion now. It's an industry that's here to stay. It is volatile. So like the stock market, sometimes Bitcoin and other certain cryptocurrencies get the reputation for a reason. Because they're so volatile, they're used by traders. There's good actors and bad actors in any business. And so we see that. We see a lot of volatility, even with Bitcoin right now. I think as time goes on, as governments get more involved private industry gets more involved, public companies get more involved, you're going to see that volatility decrease. So we're about $1 trillion right now. It was up to $3 trillion at one point. So we're in a bear market right now. It's a little bit tougher in our industry, but the strong survive, and I think they'll come out much stronger as things tend to increase.
That's so interesting. How does somebody get started in it if you don't have it? Somebody just like Joe Schmo.
Yeah, you could actually go online. It's much more regulated now. So there are exchange houses where you can open up an account, know your client. So you'll fill out some various forms, driver's license you'll have to send in, and then you can open up. So it's like a brokerage account, and you can buy Bitcoin straight off those exchange houses. Now, once you get a little bit more involved, you can hold your coins privately. So that's part of the interest in Bitcoin is instead of holding your wealth at a bank where there's third-party liabilities to it, and it has to be insured by the government and lots of checks and balances. In this case, you can actually hold your wealth separately in your own. I have one of them right here. This is a little ledger device, so you could literally have $100,000 if you want it on a ledger device. Only the codes and access, so there's no third-party liability risk.
That's so crazy. What do you think is the future of cryptocurrency? Do you think it is the way of the future?
I do. I think there has to be, for any new technology, there has to be utility to it. So right now there's probably 20,000 different cryptocurrencies, tokens out there. I think 95% of them will die. I think trial and error companies are in there, seeing what works, seeing what sticks and what doesn't. I think certain of them, and it's very much like the internet was back in the late 90s, the Amazons of the world were born out of that. And I think you're going to see the same thing occurring right now. Those 20,000 are going to get whittled down, but those that do exist and continue will get much larger. I think Bitcoin, the granddaddy of them all, will be integrated to, like I said, orphan wells to help that. It'll get integrated into industry. Greenhouses, for example, if you want to grow food more locally and not import it from Mexico and California, long ways away, you could grow it locally. Well, how about using the heat that Bitcoin miners produce to heat greenhouses and reduce the cost there? So I think there's a great opportunity to localize things in terms of food growth production using Bitcoin miners as a heat source. So I think there's a great future ahead of it.
Absolutely fascinating. But Ryan, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us and filling us in on the world of digital currency.
Absolutely, Jeanette. Thanks very much for having me.
Absolutely. That was Ryan Chernitsky, Director of Modern Mining, digging for digital values in Medicine Hat, Alberta. I'm Jeanette Roche on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News. Thanks for watching.